to come along, just in terms of the ideology. David Rockefeller, the honcho in here, was tutored by von Hayek. And David Rockefeller financed von Mises. Now that means your holy books are essentially a Bilderberger creation from beginning to end. I go with John Quincy Adams, Lincoln, Hamilton, FDR, Kennedy. Those are not controlled.
Well, we don't have holy books in the libertarian movement. We have holy ideas. We have sacred principles. We have the non-aggression principle. We have the self-ownership. Well, see, now you're making more appeals to authority. And in the age of the internet, we reject those. Our appeals are to logic and reason and evidence, not to authority.
Cults. Believe me, I've seen enough of personality cults.
I'm not saying that we don't have personality cults within the movement. Absolutely we do. But the principles behind the libertarian message are in direct contradiction to that, and we don't have sacred books. We have sacred ideas. We have sacred principles. But hold on, sure. But let me get to the crux of the issue here, because you said that Ron Paul's proposed cuts were savage cuts, and you said that what Peter Thiel, by creating voluntary societies, truly free, governmentless societies, would be creating openings for immorality, as you said, slavery and prostitution and drug use and things like that. Right, of course, but it's what do people want? And what I would say is that what we have now, the source of all those funds, you say it's savage to cut government spending. I think what's more savage is when you have the government saying, you people can't figure out how to do these things without force and violence. You guys can't figure out how to address poverty. You can't figure out how to get along in a free society. We have to impose some system by a central authority, by force and violence. And if anything, the people here at Bilderberg are the beneficiaries of government. But this is no. This is an important philosophical crux in the difference here from libertarianism and statism. Anytime you say that we need government for something, because government is force, government is violence, what you are saying is we give up on creating a peaceful way of solving this problem. We give up on a voluntary, cooperative way of addressing this issue. We are simply going to have a vote. We are going to elect people. We are going to have somehow the majority will imposed by force on the minority, or as is inevitably the product of constitutional government, as we've seen in the United States, we end up with a minority oligarchy, like here at Bilderberg, that gets to use government to impose its will on people because we accept this idea that we need rulers. We couldn't possibly, as a society, figure out how to get along. These aren't abstractions. These are real things.
Here's concrete. In the United States right now, you got 50 to 60 million people. They are there thanks to Bill Clinton, first of all, because Bill Clinton destroyed welfare.
Wait, 50 to 60 who what?
Million people who are in extreme dire poverty. And they are there because Bill Clinton, to get himself reelected, destroyed welfare, one of the titles of the Social Security Act of 1935. He began the process of stripping away the economic rights of the American people, the right not to be destitute. If you're destitute, a society full of destitute people is on its way to a dictatorship, and don't tell me the libertarian litany about that. The 50 to 60 million people are in dire poverty. We found the statistics came out during the course of the first half of the year, right? How many people are in dire poverty? They don't have health care. They can't afford it. A lot of them are on the verge of starvation. They are saved by food stamps. There are now almost 50 million people on food stamps. Anybody who proposes to cut the food stamp budget by 2/3, or just about, in that kind of a depression, is proposing genocide against the American people. Now, when I see genocide, I say, never again. I'm sorry. Never again to anybody, and least of all to the American people. Well, I think that's the heart of the matter. Now, don't tell me about voting and force and violence and all this stuff. The act of violence carrying out here is to make people starve to death by proposing to cut off their food stamps, which are wretched enough, believe me.
So you don't think that the imposition of taxation by force, that the extraction of the wealth from the American people, that is an excuse for, is more responsible for that poverty? You don't think that the government has anything to do with creating these problems?
Look, you got to tell me if I kill a significant part of the 50 million who are now living on food stamps? You got to tell me how that helps anybody. How does that make anything better? Oh, it solves the deficit. Yeah, that's the method that.
Okay, well, let me ask you then a more hypothetical question.
Yeah, I know you want to be.
Because yeah, you want that, of course. No. Do the American people want to take care of people who are starving in this country? Do the American people, out of the goodness of their hearts, really do they want to do this?
The issue is the food stamp program, TAMP, right? Temporary Assistance to Needy Families, and SNAP, right? Supplemental Nutritional Assistance Program. Is that going to be funded or not? And if you say no, with everything else remaining the same, right? Ceteris paribus, everything else being equal, that's genocide.
Well, look, just because I
don't care.
hold on. I let you finish now. Give me a minute to have to get my full ideas and rebuttal out. Because just because I'm against the government wiping my ass doesn't mean that I'm for having shit all over it. Just because that we don't want a central authority to impose something doesn't mean that we're against the benefits. No, these are real ideas. Because if you had a people that wanted to take care of poor people, if that wanted the products that government provides that are legitimate services that people want to consume, wouldn't you be able to convince people to go along with this? Wouldn't you be able to convince and persuade people to be a part of the system? Wouldn't it? Well, no, it's a real world where people can actually get together peacefully and create superior solutions to ones that, I mean, if your ideas are so anarcho-capitalism, voluntarism, because I have a moral problem with ever using force against someone who is acting peacefully. And if you say that we need government for something, you're saying that it's impossible.
You got a problem with violence?
Genocide?
How about starving? I don't know how many million of those people will die if we cut off their food stamps?
The original crime that was an initiation of force was making them dependent on government in the first place.
Here where we are now, in the here and now. How is your Ron Paul 2/3 cut of food stamp budget going to do anything positive except kill a lot of Americans?
Well,
and
now,
as we can see from Germany, 1930 to 32, destroy the economy, destroy the political system, and open the door to fascism. Let me add another one. If you're concerned about totalitarianism, okay, and I am, you got to realize the only way you fight totalitarianism is to have powerful mass organizations. And among these, some of the most important are trade unions. Now,
I thought powerful organizations were a form of totalitarianism.
No, if you're going to fight a totalitarian state, suppose somebody seizes power in Washington and tries to create a totalitarian government. It's happening.
Like Obama?
Huh? No, I'm talking more like Hitler, let's say. If you get a Hitler comes to power in Washington, how can you stop him? You call a general strike. You got to fight. You got to have an open-ended general strike with demonstrations and all the rest, political strikes. Who could do that? Unions could do that. And now along come Ron Paul and Rand Paul saying, oh yeah, we're for liberty, but in the meantime we're going to destroy the only organizations that have a prayer of preventing totalitarian rule.
You raise a valid point, and let me get to the heart of this, which is what does the libertarian message do to address poverty? And I think we can at least agree
dictatorship,
that
genocide.
we address dictatorship and genocide by condemning all of the immoral initiations of force that underpin those philosophies, those ideas that make that possible. But no, this is really
consoling word.
This is but this is important.
They need their food stamps, my friend. They need to eat something.
They need government. They need government. They absolutely are dependent on systems of violence. No,
that's all that's left.
Well, Webster, are you going to give me a minute to actually address this? Are you going to give? Come on, man.
I like their ambition is that when
I've got the mic, you're not even being picked up. Come on, man.
That's all there is. Then you damn well better have food stamps. Yes, rather than genocide.
Okay, well this now
anything is better than genocide.
And I'm not going to address this in terms of the Ron Paul plan, because again, right there, you're making an appeal to authority for something specifically, because I'm advocating something different. But there is a principle that he has discussed, which is that we need to cut foreign aid first. That when you re-empower the American economy, and you would agree with this, by eliminating the unnecessary foreign military spending and foreign aid, that people on average will be much more prosperous here in the United States, will be much more able to address the issue of poverty. No, but first we do that, then we address that issue. But here's the crux of this, is that the system that we have today that keeps people dependent on welfare is holding people back from real economic opportunity, from real economic development. And what we should do is address this. And I don't want, no, but the reason that we don't have jobs jobs is because government makes it too expensive to employ people with regulations and taxation and the minimum wage. But if
That's Chamber of Commerce rhetoric, huh? You sound like a reactionary Republican of the 1930s.
Except that I'm a voluntarist anarcho-capitalist, and we're moving forward to a new paradigm.
A libertarian is a reactionary Republican, maybe with some narcotics thrown in and a little bit of wild stuff, right?
Come on, Webster. I thought you'd have a slightly more respect for the seriousness of the philosophy that we're proposing and discussing here.
This, if you call von Hayek and Mises a philosophy, this is the lowest dreck of the failed economists of the world, right? And again, in the 50s and 60s, this stuff it would have been laughed out of any serious discussion. It was so primitive. It was the language of the Chamber of Commerce, the reactionary businessman, the union buster, Father Coughlin, or
I have some bad news for you. This is the language of the future. This is the way people who grew up with the internet are looking at government. This is the way that people who have no tolerance for the kind of problems that exist for lack of information have as an attitude towards the world, because we look at the world dominated by government. We look at the underlying causes. We ask why, and we don't stop asking why. And when you ask why about government, you never get any good, satisfactory answers. And in your case, what you're saying and advocating for a government welfare state, saying when we say, why do you need a system of force? Why do you need to take money from people at the barrel of a gun? You have to force the system of taxation in order to do that, because you cannot convince them that the government system is going to be the most effective way to take care of poor people, that private charity isn't more efficient, more effective, more moral, and more sustainable. That has always been the case. But more importantly, we believe in the free market ideal that is two individuals exchange goods and services just as we are right now. There's no force and coercion here, except when I take the mic away from you. And we're able to exchange without force, fraud, or coercion. And any time you introduce that, where we think that we're benefiting for mutual benefit, or we're interacting for mutual benefit, anytime you introduce force into the equation, one person doesn't benefit. One person is a victim. And what you are doing is taking away that capitalist ideal that humanity has the ability to achieve anything through the market, through peaceful, voluntary cooperation. And anytime you introduce force into that, you are taking away that potential. And the people today that are here, that grew up with the internet, the youth in America that sees the potential, don't accept any of these justifications that you put forth for more government, for a welfare state, because we know that when you entrust a system that has the power to, by either representative government or by majority vote, somehow force its will on a minority of dissenters, not only are you violating those basic moral principles, but you're creating the avenue to tyranny that allows for the Bilderberg group that we're here protesting to exist in the first place.
The avenue to tyranny is the destruction of all unions and the kind of austerity. If you want to see what Hitler came from, he came from an austerity program very similar to Ron Paul's, the Bruning years from 1930 to 1932. Look, you got all this wild spinning rhetoric. There are 50 million Americans that have to have dinner tonight. What's your proposal?
I'm not for immediate. No, I'm not for abolishing it immediately. No, and you're talking about you're talking about the Ron Paul plan, and you're mistaking Ron Paul for the message of liberty. He is not. He is someone who has taken the philosophy and done his best to embodiment in a practical form to reduce government violence, applying it to the immediate problems of government. And under his plan, and you should have more respect for this, he has said we end foreign military spending, and then we find a way to phase out, without pulling the rug out from underneath anybody, the domestic welfare spending here at home.
That's what he says. But see, Ron Paul has committed a tremendous mistake by putting this Restore America on the internet. I urge everybody, look at that Restore America.
His specific plan, you mean?
It's a detailed budget plan for how to cut $1 trillion from the federal budget in 1 year, and it spells genocide. And the 62% cut in the food stamps, he wants to cut WIC. How about WIC? It's about $2 or $3 billion. WIC is high protein meals for expectant mothers. And it has to be, those meals have got to be there now, because the babies are going to come into the world. If they don't get enough protein, they're going to have cognitive impairment their whole lives. So you have all of this crazy rhetoric, right? All of this, it's really Bentham, right? It's Bentham and John Stuart Mill and a whole bunch of British East India Company claptrap. What's left is the American people are in agony, and your only proposal is to strip them. I notice you didn't talk about anything with class consciousness. You didn't say we're going to expropriate the rich predators of Wall Street. We're going to tax Wall Street turnover. We're going to shut down the speculators.
This is a good point, and I will say that this is one legitimate weakness of the libertarian philosophy, is that it does not completely, to everyone's satisfaction, address the existing concentrations of wealth and power that are the product of the government-managed market. But what we are saying is that we are making the conscious choice that we would rather deal with that peacefully than violently. Now, you are saying that we might have a genocide, and you use that term in terms of what would happen if we cut welfare here in the United States. That Americans are so